Welcome to Dhaka Tribune presents Straight Talk, one-on-one conversations with newsmakers and opinion shapers. I'm Dhaka Tribune editor Zafar Sobhan, and I'm joined in conversation this week by Anushay Hossain, a DC-based political analyst and journalist. Of Anushay's Point in Spilling Chai fame, you have possibly seen her on CNN, PBS, MSNBC. But I think this is the first time Anushay is doing a Bangladeshi broadcast. So thank you so much for being on the show today, Anushay.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Well, the reason I wanted you on the show is because with 1 month to go before the US presidential election, I really wanted to focus this episode of Straight Talk on the election. I thought, well, you know, there is no one better to discuss this upcoming election with than you. You're a journalist in Washington, D.C., in the belly of the beast. And what I wanted to start you off with is if you could just tell us here in Bangladesh, just what is at stake in this election? How momentous is it? How important is it? What are the implications for both America and indeed the rest of us?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Zafar, on your show. And second of all, it is such an intense time, not only in Washington, but just in America. I feel like right now, first of all, I could not be more dramatic about how high the stakes are, what is at stake. And every day, every moment, there is just, you know, the news is developing, the story is developing, and to add to everything that is at play, we have somebody who is in the White House right now, the president of the United States himself, who really thrives on chaos, on the unknown, on drama. These are things that he plays to his strength and to his advantage. And we are so close to this election, Zafar. And, you know, people talk about an October surprise, but really, if we just even talk about what the stakes were last week, it's really different than what the stakes are today, because
I mean, exactly, it's week by week, and you would think, you know, Trump getting COVID is a you know, that could be an October surprise, but I'm sure they'll pack in another 3 or 4 between now and election day, I fear.
Well, you know, exactly, just that. I mean, just the fact that there's discussion now about what is the precedent of the United States, a super spreader. Was the Supreme Court event, confirmation nominee event that they had, was that a super spreader event? And it's a very interesting time now because, you know, as people like you and I who have lived in America, but we have grown up from outside of America, you know, we have this kind of dual perspective on things, which is, do Americans really understand how dangerous things are right now? I mean, I feel like amongst a lot of my colleagues, people are always like, oh, no, that won't happen in America, or this can't happen in America. Our institutions will protect us. But coming from a country where we have seen military coup, where we have seen when the leader of the country, where the commander in chief might be removed, is not in a position, does not have their health. I mean, these are questions that not only American analysts have never had to answer about their own country, but really that Americans have had the privilege of growing up not to even think about. And the other really interesting thing is how valid is the information that we're getting? Who are we getting our information from? Can we trust this information? Because initially, let's not forget, the White House did not tell the American people that, or anybody, that the president was infected, that the president wasn't well. This was an independent story that was broken by a journalist at Bloomberg. So it was a reporter that broke this story to the press. And this is something else that, you know, this is what I was trying to kind of bring up earlier, which is, there are so many interesting things at play here. The president who encouraged us to be dismissive of this pandemic, who didn't believe in it, who still is encouraging people not to mask, is himself infected. This president who never really believed in, you know, what he calls socialized healthcare, is now relying on the best healthcare, the healthcare he doesn't even want the average American to have, on himself to survive. This president, this administration, who has attacked the press repeatedly. Now Americans are seeing, wow, we wouldn't have even known this information if it wasn't for the press. So there's so many things at play. And I think, honestly, what is at stake is the existence
right.
of America.
I mean, let's back up a little, and and I think you're absolutely right. It seems to me a lot of American commentators and just regular everyday Americans have been perhaps a little slow to wake up to the dangers, and in a sense, as you say, that's a privilege because they never really had to think along these lines, but. You have an interesting insider-outsider perspective.
Exactly.
Tell me a little bit about how you have seen America, in fact, change over the last 4 years of Trump's presidency, and what could happen if he's given another 4 years.
I can't even imagine what would happen if he's given another 4 years, because I'm still trying to process what has happened in the past 4 years. I do think it's really interesting.
I mean, no one could have believed it, right?
No.
I mean, some of the changes we've seen.
And it's not just journalists like us, but you will see journalists of color, period. Okay.
Yeah.
Just on Twitter, it's so fascinating to see. We almost have to bite our tongues. I know I'm biting my tongue, as so many prominent, let's say, white journalists or American journalists are kind of coming on the scene now and being like, you guys, this is bad. This could be a banana republic. This could be X, Y, and Z. And the rest of us are like, how many people of color rang the bell the day that Trump got in the White House? So many American immigrants, so many Black people, brown people were like, we can't stay in this country anymore. Trump is racist. And then for so long, people were like, is Trump really racist? Can we say that? Is Trump sexist? And I'm like, hey, we don't even have the privilege to ponder. We know who this guy is. And now people are still uncomfortable saying, is Trump a white supremacist? Could he be a white nationalist? When even the white supremacists are like, he is our guy. We love this man. So,
and of course, I think there's this great belief that American institutions would save them or save the world. Whereas, of course, if the institutions had been operating so well, then he wouldn't be in the White House in the first place. I think one's first clue that perhaps the American institutions were not as robust as people thought was the fact that he actually happened to blow through the Republican primary in 2016, and then in fact end up in the White House, even though he had 3 million less votes than his contender. I mean, we learned a lot about the robustness. And basically, what we're seeing is a system which entrenches minority rule, and of course, it does that. The Electoral College is one example of that, but the U.S. Senate is very much another. But of course. Unlike other upper houses, like let's say the Rajya Sabha in India or the House of Lords in the UK, the Senate is absolutely a legislative body, and it has massive importance and impact.
Yes.
And so, the fact that the Democrats have a majority in the House, which probably reflects where the nation is. Electorally really doesn't matter, given the fact that the Republicans have a majority in the Senate. So if we're talking about Supreme Court nominations, for instance, that's in the hands of the Senate. It's nothing to do with the House, right?
Exactly. Well, this is really fascinating, which a lot of people don't understand, is how the U.S. government works. And another fascinating thing, which is at play, is that Trump, since day one, has been undermining the very institutions that work for him, that are supposed to protect him. It started with the FBI, then he went after the Department of Justice. And now, after replacing people in key positions within those institutions, especially, with Bill Barr, the current Attorney General of the United States, Trump is now using those very institutions that he undermined to also protect himself. Another very interesting thing that we discovered in the 2016 election, well, the world discovered, is that in America, you don't need to get the most votes to be the winner. And really getting into the Electoral College, really the core of all
of the most amazing statistics I've read over the past few weeks, and of course it's obvious when you sort of sit down and think about it, kind of do the math, is since 1992, so that is 28 years, in 28 years, a Republican candidate, has won the majority of votes, just once. And that was the George W. Bush in 2004, on the heels of, you know, the war on terror, the Iraq war, all of that. I think in the every single other election, okay, since 1992. That's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
But yet almost half of that time, the U.S. has been under Republican presidential rule.
Exactly. And you know what, we've had this issue before where one party has, you know, majority in the Senate or majority in the House. And whenever there is a contesting like this, and this is another thing that Trump has already set up without even discussing, is he sick? Is he going to get better? What information are we getting? The way he has set it up between the Senate and the court, if this election is contested, let's just say with everything we don't, well, all the unanswered questions we have, let's put those to the side. Let's just say, I mean, just back to pre-COVID Donald Trump, when he was already getting ready to undermine this election. He has laid his little foundation everywhere, because what is he going to say? I don't trust the election. I don't trust the mail-in voting system. I'm not going to accept that this election was free and fair. This is going to go to the court. And the Supreme Court was already going to be stacked with Trump's guys.
You know how they're going to rule.
Exactly. Yeah. And now everybody is like, if he's a super spreader, if this was a super spreader event, now Biden is saying that we shouldn't even hold the next presidential debates. So while all this chaos is going on in the midst of all of this, what is also interesting is that the vice presidential debates, which are tonight,
tonight your time,
are more important. What is that Dhaka time? It's in the morning. But probably the most important vice presidential elections in recent history. I mean, have you ever, Zafar?
You've got a president who's 74 years old, and you've got the challenger who's 77. So I would definitely say the interesting thing I just realized recently is that Mike Pence is only 61 years old. It's ridiculous. He looks like he's 110, but he's actually relatively young compared to Biden and Trump.
You know, it's interesting because Pence, we could have a whole episode of your show just talking about Mike Pence, because while all this chaos is going on, he has been waiting in the wings. A lot of people, from the get-go of the Trump presidency didn't take Donald Trump seriously, because everyone was like, well, that guy is really the president. That guy is the one really waiting in the wings to be president. And that is Pence, who actually is a lot more conservative. And a lot of people would
he's a lot more conservative. But I mean, I sometimes think though that, and that Trump is kind of uniquely dangerous in that he has this utter contempt for institutions and norms and even basic civility. Okay, so Pence may be politically even worse, sort of in terms of his views and his policies, unpalatable. But I can't see, Pence is not the kind of person who would, like, mock the death of his contenders, military son.
But doesn't that make him a little bit more? Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying.
But
I wonder.
Let's also not forget that Pence. No, I see what you're saying. What could be worse? What is more crass, kind of? And who has less morals?
You guys are a good point. It could be stylistic. So Trump has all of these stylistic problems, but actually, if you're talking about actual policy, because Trump really doesn't believe in policy. He's just going to do whatever it takes to keep himself in power.
Exactly.
So, but Pence does have an agenda. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Pence has an agenda, and let's not forget the decades he worked for the tobacco company. This is somebody that can. I mean, Trump is somebody who won't, even offer his condolences for your dead military son. But Pence is someone who will sell you products that will give you cancer and kill you with a straight face, all while doing some straight talk. So what we both agree on, what the point is America is in a very dangerous, probably the most dangerous position it has been in my living memory, and probably yours too.
Possibly since the Civil War. I mean, that's what people are saying. And I think that seems right to me.
Yeah, and also Zafar, everything else aside, just think. I mean, what keeps me up at night when I look at my kids when they're sleeping is, are we safe? Who is in charge of American national security right now? What are American enemies thinking?
Well, you wrote a piece I read I feel I read it like some months ago. It might have been written earlier, but being a Muslim in America, okay?
Yeah.
Being a Muslim, being an immigrant, being Latino, being African American, these people, and here's the thing, what I'm seeing is, and this is something, we may be used to here in Bangladesh and other countries sort of around the world. But, I think it seems to me the chances for violence, actual real violence surrounding this election are quite high. Yes. And everyday Americans such as you and your family, you don't like me calling you American, you're Bangladeshi American, someone living in America has to worry about these things. And I don't think that's something, I guess, one would have ever worried about in the past.
No. And can I tell you, you're absolutely right. But also this is going back to our point on how naive and privileged and protected Americans have been. I mean, I have a plan. I totally have a doomsday plan.
It's probably
because the worst case scenario, because the worst case scenario is that the elections are going to be contested. There's going to be some kind of post-election violence. That's something that Trump has encouraged his independent poll watchers to do. But we also have, the racial tensions in America are as raw and as tense as it probably has ever been. Really since the 60s. And the riots that we have seen, the news cycle in America is just on steroids. But you don't even know what it was like, Zafar. Those riots that broke out after George Floyd's murder. I have never been scared for my children in America ever. But in terms of just security, we had just seen looters. They were like looting Neiman Marcus. So you can imagine what was going on, even downtown. But it is funny because I always, my father loves to talk about this, but I always said I wanted to live in America for the kids, so that my kids grow up somewhere so secure, so safe, good education. There's never going to be a war here. And now I'm not even kidding. Like my backup doomsday plan is 1-800 New Zealand.
Oh, sure. I
think
that's everywhere. My best friend actually emigrated to New Zealand a couple of decades ago. He's living an idyllic life there. I visited him some time back.
Honestly, and but it's the same thing that the Americans didn't get. My American colleagues and friends and neighbors even didn't understand in January when I was like, this pandemic is serious. It could come here. X, Y, and Z could happen. Everybody was like, are you crazy? Anushay, the CDC would do X, Y, and Z, and the HHS would do, E, F, and G. And look where we are now. We got to a point with this pandemic. Forget what America's rates are and how we have the highest number of deaths and the highest numbers of infections. But the mask in America became so politicized.
This is something my brother he was living in America until very recently, and him and his family recently just moved to Norway, which is also probably a very wise decision. Yeah. And what he was saying, and I was trying to explain to him that things aren't so great here in Bangladesh. He's like, no. He's like, it's not even comparable. Okay. He says that basically, whether people are wearing masks or whether they're doing what they're doing in Bangladesh, everyone's coming at that honestly. In America, it's a function of your political belief.
Totally.
The mask has become a proxy for what you think about Trump and who you vote for. He said it's complete madness.
Oh, totally. When I talk to my parents, I always tell them, and they agree with me. I'm like, Ami Basha Firadash to see. Dhanmundi, here I come. It is going to be a stop on the way to New Zealand. But I always, whenever we're complaining about just the state of affairs in the world, maybe it's not good. The whole world is grappling with this pandemic. But do you remember in your lifetime where people would look at America and actually feel sorry? Even when we like to talk, everybody likes to trash talk America a little bit. But when was the last time you felt pity, sorry for Americans? My heart breaks because honestly, whatever you say about this administration, I don't think the American people deserve this. Maybe Trump's little cult does.
But I agree with you. And it's not just the American people. This is possibly an unpopular point of view in Bangladesh and around the world. But, I think the world needs American leadership, okay? And so the last 4 years have been a disaster for all of us.
That is such an excellent, I love that you brought that up.
We expect, we look to America to be, and America is not perfect. We all know what it's done. We all know, the drone bombings, this, that. We all know all of that. Nevertheless, we've always looked to America to be a voice, so for human rights around the world. Yeah. And, when Obama was president, it was certainly a different country than it is right now.
Yeah. And I miss that. I mean, don't you miss, and I get it. Okay. I know all this. We know about the dark side of American foreign policy, the dark side of American history. I mean, we're Bengali.
We know very well. Absolutely.
We know very well. But at the same time, if there's ever been a point to ask yourself, what is the alternative?
Right.
What is who is going to enter this global political vacuum, this global leadership vacuum? Because I mean, it is a problem. Initially, in the early days, you know, in the early days of this administration, seems like 100 years. I would, you know, I would like to debate what is better, to have America out in the open exposed like this, because in many ways I feel like Trump has exposed America. Maybe this is what America was always about. It was deeply racist, deeply hypocritical, you know, white supremacist roots and a foundation that this country was built upon. Yeah. But then what is the alternative? Look at all the good that America's done. Without America pretending to be the world's police, is it going to be Russia not pretending to be the world's police? Because
at least America had ideals which you could then point to them not living up to.
Some kind of system. It's so organized, systems and policies. I mean,
I think in the 21st century, we're living very much, you know, in authoritarian times. You look all over the world. We live in the time of the strongman.
Yes, we do.
And in fact, in a sense, Trump is very much a man of his time. What's happening is that it used to be that, you know, America was a bulwark against authoritarianism. Again, like I said, for all of its iniquities in terms of its foreign policy, but that was one thing which you could say. Now it seems very much as though you look at someone like Putin, you look at someone like Erdogan, Modi, Xi in China, in Trump, Bolsonaro. They all are, you know, they're all of a piece.
Yeah, and it's also, it's not only the strongmen. I hope these days of the strongmen across the board around the world are numbered. It's so, another thing I will just say on the side, I am so over men and male and toxic masculinity leadership roles. We need more women in power. Just across the board. But the other thing is, yes, strongmen, you're right, but the theatrics of Trump coming back to the White House, what was the day before yesterday, and pulling his mask off. Now the mask is not only a symbol of you know, COVID being something you can be dismissive of, but if you're a real man, if you're a strong man, you know, you don't need the mask. Trump has beat COVID.
Well, in a sense, you know, I mean, if you look at his rhetoric of the last 9 months, you know, it was really the only game, you know, it was the only card he had left.
Yes,
he's all in. He's all in with this. This, you know, he's just got to push it all the way to the end. So what I'm worried about, if I look at, you know, election days coming up November 3rd, and it's going to be a complete mess because you got all the, you know, you got the mail-in ballots, and you know, it's going to be unclear on election night who actually won. In fact, I think, and what's likely to happen is, and the initial returns are going to come in showing Trump is ahead. Mm-hmm. He's going to then try and, you know, take a little victory lap and declare victory while the votes are still being counted. He's going to try and exclude mail-in ballots. It's going to be a mess. And what I really worry about is, I mean, I don't think it is far-fetched to think that, you know, he probably has like tens of thousands of people, you know, everyday Americans in militias here and there in Michigan, wherever, who would be happy to take to the streets with guns.
They're already doing it. Oh, yeah. They're already doing it. And, you know, in America, we always say, well, people of color like to say, you know, if you ever want to see gun control in America, let a bunch of black and brown people pick up their guns. The way that these white guys go, pick up their guns, and then go to the state capitol. I mean, can you imagine if a bunch of Muslims did that? It would gun control like tomorrow. So Trump has already, you know, triggered these people.
I gotta tell you, if I was living in America, I'd be tooling up right now.
Thank you for making me more anxious and nervous. I'm really scared. I'm really scared. And there's reason to be scared. And the other thing is sometimes you're just like, God, DC is so all about, you know, the politics and the policy, and we're just really in the thick of this. You just can't escape it. But now I feel like wherever you are in the world, in the country, even if it's Montana with your wild horses, a la Legends of the Fall, you have to stop and be like, am I going to be okay? I mean, the virus.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you know, do you think, and here's the thing, do you think, let's say, you know, if Biden wins and it's by enough of a majority that it cannot be contested. Do you think he can heal America, or the rifts which have been, exposed over the last 4 years? I mean, this is the thing. I know people who've told me that they just think America is now just so deeply divided, irreconcilably divided. How do you feel? Do you think that maybe something to worry about?
My husband always tells me that I'm too negative, but I always tell him I'm Bengali and I'm a realist. I can't be in fluffy positivity if I don't feel like it's real. I can be fluffy and positive, but not if I don't believe it. I don't know, Zafar. I have no idea. I mean, will the president of the United States be alive? Something else we need to talk about is he's not well. You could see even during his big dramatic return to the White House, he is his hands are shaking. He's trying to, you can tell it's not easy for him to breathe. He has a lot of makeup on.
He's 74 years old. He's obese.
He's obese. He's medically obese.
A lot of people who get COVID. I mean, I know people who've had COVID. It takes months to get over it.
I know young people who have had COVID. Yes, it's not so. I know he doesn't want to talk about this, but really the number one concern should be the health of the president. People are even saying that him, not wanting to negotiate with Pelosi about a relief package for Americans. I mean, Pelosi herself said he is on steroids. These medications, skew your thinking. I mean, even the Speaker of the House doesn't know if she can trust or believe what the president is saying because we don't know what the status of his health is. But unless there is some kind of miracle or something that happens, I don't think there's going to be a quick fix. Okay, even if Biden wins and, if we manage to convince Trump that he has to leave, because right now in DC, since the riots, there's a wall around Trump's White House. It's not like how it was before, where you could kind of, be in left square and sit.
Depends on what the Republicans are going to do, and unfortunately, in the last 4 years, they've shown us that they're willing, to go to the mat. Maybe
to the mat, because it was about the courts. The Republicans had a lot at stake, and they were keeping their eyes on the prize. And until Corona came into the picture, it looked like they had it set. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. I mean, they brought in this woman not even 24 hours later. Mitch McConnell was going to let it go to a vote in the Senate. It was all set. And then that event the nomination event became a super spreader event.
That's what it seems like. Absolutely.
And once again, we're back to the point in the beginning is the US president himself appears to be a super spreader. Even if we want to just ignore the things and, Donald Trump keeps throwing wild cards out, when is the next shoe going to drop? Who is going to die next? Last night before I went to sleep, the news was that Stephen Miller is now infected. He was there doing debate prep. Mike Pence is still testing negative. So is Biden. But I mean, I have no idea. This is like a reality TV show gone off the rails. On steroids, literally. But that being said, if there is something amazing happens and Biden is elected, even then, there's no quick fix.
There's going to be a long, hard road back.
A long, hard road back.
What do you actually see happening? I'm asking you to be kind of a fortune teller, which isn't entirely fair. But what do you think is the most likely scenario on November 3rd? I mean, there's a number of various scenarios you've talked about, but what do you think, or perhaps even fear, is the most likely outcome? Or do you think that actually, I'm beginning to think that with, sort of 27 days before the election, it's impossible to even say, because literally the world as it stands today is utterly different from what it was 7 days ago, and God knows what it's going to be like 7 days from now. I mean, we probably can't tell until days before, but we shouldn't prognosticate until then, maybe.
Well, I will say I've never been on a political talk show where I have said, Bangladesh is the place to go when America burns. It's so ironic, Zafar, growing up in Dhaka and, being Bengali. I think I grew up always with America or the EU sending election monitors.
Right.
To make sure we're doing our election right, to make sure we're doing democracy right. And here we are.
Those days are long gone. And as I mentioned, next week I'm going to be part of a seminar training American journalists on how to cover this election and how to stay safe while they cover it.
Yes. And you know what? I mean, it's funny. You and I can laugh at it, but at the same time, your American journalist colleagues and peers need your advice, because not only are they asking the right questions, do they know how to ask what the right questions are afterwards? I mean, honestly, the one thing I can tell you,
look for. What should you be looking for? You know, what is important, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing the only thing I know for sure, and I think that Americans should be ready for, is that this election will be contested. Not to expect to wake up on the 3rd or November 4th and be like, here's our new president, let's keep moving. That's another thing that Americans in America have to learn. Nothing is quick. Nothing is just
I think you're absolutely right. So whatever, we don't know what's going to happen, but I think you're absolutely right to say it's not going to end on the morning of the 4th.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing that we can do is, I don't know, people, and the most important thing Americans can do just for psychological prep, just for mental prep, is don't expect a clear-cut answer. We're definitely not going to have that. Even if the system prevails and we get a clear-cut answer, Trump is not going to accept that. So
exactly. It's going to continue. Yeah, the system.
And I don't think we've ever been able to contest something like this and expect some kind of violence. If it isn't white supremacist violence, there's going to be violence just on the street, because there's 40 million Americans who are out of jobs. They're hungry. They're sick. They don't have health insurance. They don't have homes. I mean, you look at a lot of things that, like Italy did or France did, suspending mortgage payments or not having to pay rent. I mean, none of that relief was given to Americans, and that $600 or that $1,200 that Trump was able to give out, as relief stimulus package earlier this summer. I mean, that is long gone. I mean, there's people. The largest addiction.
$1,200 doesn't last a long time.
It doesn't last for a long time at all. And if you have kids, and if you have a family, and if you don't have health care, how expensive medicine and healthcare is to get in America. So. I mean, it's a weak, suffering population. I mean, my heart breaks. It's so sad. And, anytime my kids complain they're virtually learning, whatever, they can't have play dates like they used to, I'm like, don't forget that people right now are homeless, living in their cars, and have no food to eat in the richest country in the world. So this election, a lot is riding on this election. Too much.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Anushay, thank you so much. I think this has been an eye-opening and insightful discussion, and I will join you in hoping for the best, but, keeping a wary eye on the horizon, because anything can happen between now and November 3rd. And as you point out, it's not going to end on November 3rd or November 4th. We need to, I think, dig in at least for the medium term.
Yes,
so
I agree.
Hoping for the best. Thank you, Anushay.
Thank you so much, Zafar. Take care. Speak to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in. This has been Zafar Sobhan with Straight Talk. Join you again next week.